it the happy family photo.
What happened, Mom wanted to have a family photo. And so I think that, Kay, were you in Seattle or you were in Bellingham? Kay was still in Bellingham, but Chuck and Paul were at the UW. And I remember they had to drive up, and we were late and not happy, as you can tell. Oh, yeah, so anyway, that's the happy family photo.
What's this photo?
This, yeah, Father's Day, and the photographer from Bellingham Herald came in, and it was set up, and it was in the paper. Yeah?
You look so happy there.
Yeah, I know, that was before we knew about life.
There's that one more picture too.
That's a happier one. I think that was at Ann's, it was at Ann's house, Thanksgiving. Yeah.
So you mentioned the visit to Salem, which is just, serendipitous. Think about it. They were planning the trip and talking about, well, we're thinking about August, and we're like, yeah, you should probably go soon. And they came down. Where is it? And all the sisters made it down and had a wonderful visit with them. And it was just so special to have them all there, and what great timing. And then they came back through Seattle and visited. My friend Peter lent us his boat and went out to dinner and came back in. He named them the Ant Colony. I don't think they like that name. But they're an ant colony. So thank you, aunties.
Thank you.
So Dad, he valued his family over everything. He also valued hard work and discipline and connecting with people. Those were some of the things that jump out and that you've heard so far and talking, hearing from folks. I'm going to touch a little bit on something that was important to him, and that is his Army life. And I'm all third person from this, so we have some folks here that served with him, which is amazing. But he joined the ROTC in college, from what I understand, in part to help pay for it, and he wanted to follow his brother's footsteps into the military. And typically when you do the ROTC, you have some duty after college, and then you leave. But he stayed for 42 years, I think, in total, and ended up being a full colonel. So he really enjoyed the camaraderie that he had. He enjoyed the challenge. He was able to travel all over the world, Belgium, Japan, Germany, and just, got so much out of it, as well as serving our country. So it's neat. We have a couple of his friends, after he passed away, sent me some quotes, just kind of in a text message, but one was his friend Herb Meister, who said, Paul was one of those people you meet in life that you just know is special. He said he was immediately likable, intelligent, very kind. Reserve was that much more fun working with him. His other friend Jacob Smulen said Paul was a class act. I had so much fun serving with him in the Army Reserve, and he had some memorable times being deployed together, especially in Belgium. He ingratiated himself to the local officials in Ghent, Belgium, and he was invited to speak at a local Rotary Club, which is another theme that he was very active in the Rotary, which we'll hear in a minute. But he always had a smile, and most importantly, a lot of good common sense. So, and I miss him. So Army was important to him. There's some neat medals and things out there that you can see. Work was very important to him as well. And Mike, maybe you're going to chat a little bit about his Texaco time.
So Dad spent 47 years in the oil industry. I know he wasn't happy that I had an electric car, but he was a loyal employee for just 2 employers in his whole life. Texaco for 20 years. And they were going to transfer him to either New York or Houston. And he Hawaii, and decided they wanted to stay in the Pacific Northwest. I was graduating from high school, Dave was getting into high school, and he made a jump to a company called Pacific Pride, an Truex oil company, and worked for them for 27 years. He told me that that is what saved his life, the move to Pacific Pride. His blood pressure dropped 30 points, and he absolutely loved his experience here in Salem. It brought him to their home, their lifetime home in Salem, to Illahe, and he was going to retire at 65 and got to that point and just couldn't leave it, and worked another 5 years and made it to age 70. So he was a good, hard-working guy, and so beyond his work life, the most important part of his life is when this young lady stepped into his world. They met in 1958. And Mom, do you want to say a few words about your time with Dad?
Well, okay, I'll get taller. Okay, in 1958, another person introduced me to Paul and went on his way. And then in 1959, I met Paul again, and because somebody said that let's go to Sandpoint officer space to dance, and they just put us together. And so then I found, you know, we had a wonderful time dancing, even though he didn't like dancing that much. And I kind of led him around a little bit. And so afterwards, I thought he had a little puckajunk car from Bellingham that, you know, took very little gas, 50 cents a gallon then. But he started his car, and all of a sudden, on the way back to take me back to his sorority sister's house, he lifted up the hood and all this steam came out. Oh my gosh. And you know, when he did that, I thought, you know, we've dated a little bit, but college was more important, so I was bound to graduate. Studying came first. But then he ran across the street, and lights were on in the house. He was probably a Boeing worker. And he knocked on the door, and he said, could you get my date a cab? The guy said, come on in. You can look in the book yourself and find one. Who would do that today? Anyway, he did. And at that time, I said to myself, I could really fall in love with this man. And I did. And so I am happy here today. And I have on my cell phone a picture of Paul before he died. So every time I look at my phone, I have wonderful, happy memories. So I can't be sad. And these great sons are my rocks. Trust me. So I'm in good hands, and I'm happy we're doing this today. One other thing, I think he would look down now and say, I can't believe I have this many friends. And a lot from Boom Ridge, where I am, and that is my home. And I'm just glad to see them. Everybody else who came here that I've known from the past were so welcoming. Thank you ever so much.
We have lots of pictures. We won't go through them all. There's a slideshow going on over there, and so many stories to tell. When I was looking through all the pictures, I found this little nugget. What's going on there? Caught some salmon, obviously, and it looked like he was forcing Leona to hold them up.
I caught a couple.
So
Give me credit.
I just wanted to share a couple thoughts about what my dad meant to me and some things he left with me, when we'll wait till the voters are.
Keep going, brother.
Okay. So, people have mentioned this today that I look a little bit like him. So, it's pretty clear the apple didn't fall far from the tree. You know, I thank my dad for the DNA that he's given me. Probably that includes his heart. And I hope with some good medicine and exercise and diet, and my wife taking care of me, that I'll make it to 88 like he did. But beyond his physical heart, I hope I inherited some of his emotional heart. The way he treated people and interacted with people and showed interest in people. I don't think I have his people connection skills, but he kind of set a roadmap for me to follow, and I appreciate him for that. My dad was known to be a little frugal at times, and I know I inherited that gene from him. I'm not sure my family will let me reserve Airbnbs anymore. Like, look at this one, it's cheap. It's like, well, it was why? You know? So, I mean, it's understandable. He grew up with 6 kids in Bellingham and supported himself through college. And, you know, and even later on in his life, he just couldn't help himself. It was just in his DNA. We'd ask him to go to the store and pick up some cheese, and he'd come home with the cheapest piece of cheese. 50% off sticker, expiring the next day. Like, Dad, come on, man. You can spend another $1. It was just, he could not help himself. And I'm aware of that, but his frugalness and his hardworking ability was truly a gift to our family. He supported a family, a wife who never worked outside the home at his request, bought houses, paid for 2 kids to go through college, traveled the world, left his wife in a position where she's well taken care of, paid for his 2 granddaughters' honeymoons. And so his frugalness was something that we should all take to heart and appreciate that part. So now I'm sure you've got some stories of Dad's.
We won't harp on the frugality, other than it's kind of funny. So there was, I guess I would say, is paradoxically, he was the most frugal and the most generous person that I knew at the same time. So Mike had some good examples there, but I had a kind of a funny one when we were younger, about that age, is we had a dog, Bimbo, and he would not send Bimbo to the dog groomers. I don't think they had those then. And he, had the crew cut. He got all the equipment to create the crew cut, and why not trim Bimbo with that? And then while you're at it, why not trim Dave and Mike? So he would line us up, seriously. In 5 minutes, we had a crew cut. No supercuts for you. No supercuts. And then, later in life, he had, saved up some money, but still had that same frugality no matter what. So we were trying to go to Hawaii, and he booked his flights, and he booked a new Alaska Airlines fare that's the lowest cost fare that you board last and you're put in the middle seat automatically, and you can never change it. He booked that one. So I made him promise never to do that again. I said, no, I won't do it. Next time, I said, Dad, you booked the Sabre fare. I couldn't help myself. So I've flown Alaska a few times, so I called them up, and they were kind enough to break the rules a little bit, and we booked them in first class. He was pretty happy, but it was super painful while we were booking it. So Mom will be flying first class from now on. The generous part, that's the most important part. So whenever we would go to dinner, it was impossible to pay for dinner. We would try. We'd kind of have some games as we got older and have real jobs and try to get to the waiter ahead of time, but he would always get to the waiter first. He just was that kind of guy. And he was very generous with others in terms of his service to the military we talked about, his Rotary volunteering. He volunteered for Meals on Wheels every Monday. He would deliver food to senior citizens that needed to. So he just had a big heart and was a generous man. Mike, I think I kind of derailed your
Yeah,
talk.
no, it's all good. I think the biggest gift my dad gave me was just growing up with an incredible support system, knowing that no matter what I did, he would always be there for me. And it's very comforting to grow up with that safety net. A lot of people don't have that. And it was, one thing that it's not just money. It was him being there. And I remember distinctly one Sunday night driving home from Salem to Eugene when I was in college, and I had this old beater pickup truck. Breaks down in the middle of nowhere, Harrisburg, Oregon, and pouring rain.
Like son, like father, apparently.
Yeah. And of course, call Dad, and he jumps in the car without complaining and picks me up, takes the truck to get, a place where it can get fixed, drops me off at school, drives all the way back home to Salem, 3 or 4 hours out of his night on a work night, and never complained. And I'm not sure I thanked him enough at the time, but I certainly appreciate it now. So he was a good dad, a great husband, and he's been a wonderful grandfather to the 5 grandkids. And
I got a couple more.
okay,
pieces.
yeah, go ahead.
And we'll get the grandkids up here so you can hear some other people talk. Some good photos there. So this one, when I was looking through the photos, kind of jumped out at me, just looking how happy he was, and he was on my boat in the San Francisco Bay. I think my friend Jim may have been on that same boat, and so thankful Jim and Renee came to this. But the metaphor there is he always had his hand on the tiller of the boat of life. And he's a man that was a great role model. He was a great listener. He was always very inquisitive. He always gave great advice. And his advice after seeing me with that mustache was to shave it. Because failure is the best teacher in life. And he too, at one point, had attempted a mustache. We had a great trip one year. We went to Bandon Dunes, just the two of us, and I'm not going to talk a lot about it, other than it's his luck of the Irish. He picked me up at the airport, and it was just sideways torrential rain. Great when you're going to a weekend golf trip. And the minute we got out of the car and took our clubs out, it stopped raining, and it never rained again the whole time. So he had the luck of the Irish. So a couple of things, and then I'll wrap it up. But in talking to some friends here that connected with me after he passed away, I had one friend that told me that your dad taught me how to be. My dad taught me how not to be. And that kind of resonated with me. Another friend reminded me of a story when we were in high school. I had really long hair, and like a lot of us back then, and played music and wanted to be in a rock band. We had a singer, we had a drummer, I played guitar, but we didn't have a bass player. So my friend Dan wanted to join us. Only problem is he didn't have a bass or know how to play the bass. So we went to the music store, and he figured out this whole setup, but he didn't have the money to pay it. And so he asked his parents if they could co-sign for him to get a layaway plan for a few months. And we couldn't wait 6 months. We needed the band right then and there. So his mom said no, she wouldn't do it. And his dad was nowhere to be found, so I asked my dad. And he said, is he good for it? I said, absolutely. Co-signed. So just a small example of what kind of guy he was. And I remember asking him about his dad, and I think he was a wonderful man, but he was a hard-working guy, and he was a doctor and did a lot of house calls and liked to hunt and fish, and he wasn't around a whole lot. So he wasn't a bad guy, he just wasn't the kind of dad my dad was. And I said, what was your dad like? He said he was just a dad. Just a dad. So my dad was not just a dad, our dad. It's been said that much of one's success in life is just showing up. So he showed up, he always showed up. He came to every wrestling match, every bad musical performance of saxophone and violin, every important moment in life. Even when I was an adult, he would come to my athletic events. I had a midlife crisis and decided to do a marathon. He was there at the finish line in Seattle. I kind of started doing some triathlons. They flew up to British Columbia to see me finish there. So they were always there anytime we needed them, and Dad was a great dad. So with that, let's have the grandkids.
You know
Let's
what,
have,
I think his wrestling coach was coming today.
He's here. John Horn,
Yes.
somewhere.
Okay, we're gonna have we have 4 of the 5 grandkids. Hannah came down with COVID yesterday, so we did not want her to expose anyone, so.
All right, hi everyone. Thanks for being here. For those I haven't met yet, I'm Taylor, Mike's daughter and the eldest granddaughter of Paul. I feel so fortunate to have shared very special memories, many of them with my grandpa. A few highlights just for today that revolve around the various joys that he shared with our family. My youngest memory was his love for music. He'd turn on his favorite songs and have me as a baby bopping around next to him. That sparked some of my lifelong nicknames that he still calls me. Beep Bop Balua and Taylor James, aka James Taylor, aka Taylor James. Then his love for the beach, whether that was special trips to the Oregon coast with him and my grandma, or to Kauai. Grandpa always had the most joy just baking in the sun without much sunscreen on or being close to the ocean. And as a kid, every time we were lucky enough to have a sleepover at Grandma and Grandpa's, he'd share his love and joy for cooking his special pancakes. I still try to replicate his batches to this day, and they'll never be quite as delicious as his were. I was lucky enough as well to not only share his love for travel, but also his love for adventure. On his 80th birthday, we did our biggest adventure together, which was his wish of skydiving. Another bucket list item for both of us. I was definitely more terrified seeing him fall out of the plane first than doing the action myself, but it was so special and one I'll never forget. Most of all, he shared his love for our family. He dedicated his life to supporting his family by raising 2 amazing fathers, and always being there to share advice with his grandkids. He was a committed father, husband, and grandfather, and even during one of his first health scares when I was young, he committed to making it to my high school graduation, but he not only did that, he also made it to my college graduation and to my wedding this past year. We miss you already, Grandpa, but know you're in a great place. Rest in peace. Hi, everyone. My name's Abby. I guess I'm the second oldest grandkid. And I'm going to kind of continue a theme that Dave brought up. But, you know, there's so much that I'll always remember and love about Grandpa. But one thing specifically that I always remember, even when I was really little, starting to play tennis tournaments, seeing Grandma and Grandpa in the stands, traveling to see us, extended into high school and to college, where this picture was taken. Grandma and Grandpa flew all the way to West Point in New York when I was playing a tournament there in college. And, you know, I think that, as we talked about earlier, like Grandpa's hard work through life, and, you know, he made sacrifices, that kind of trickled down through his kids and then to the grandkids too. And I do think that a lot of my successes, both, you know, on and off the tennis court, it's really attributed to that sense of importance of hard work that Grandpa instilled in us. And then real quickly I'll say, Grandpa and I only played tennis one time. I was in, I think, 2nd or 3rd grade. We played one set and he beat me 6-3. So Grandpa passed knowing that he was undefeated against a D1 college tennis player. Hi, I'm Chloe, his youngest grandchild. But right now I'm going to speak on behalf of my sister, Hannah, who would have loved to be here, wanted to be here. Hannah says, I really wish I could be with everyone today to celebrate the wonderful life of my grandpa. Unfortunately, however, I came down with the plague and I don't want to expose anyone. My grandpa loved his grandkids so much and really just wanted the best for all of us.
I remember so fondly waking up at their house and smelling his delicious silver dollar pancakes and bacon. Those were so good. He'd always let us drive his golf cart around the mean streets of Illahe Hills. Nothing was more fun as a little kid. I'll always remember the smell of his aftershave and the quiet mornings with his nose stuck in a book. He was the most well-read guy I know. Grandpa was so generous with his time and money. Family always came first. He helped pay for his grandkids' college educations. It's an honor to be the only Husky in a generation of Farrells. I know that I always made him proud. We are going to miss Grandpa Paul. He was a great man and I love him very much. I hope that everyone gives each other a big hug for me today, especially Grandma Leona. Love you all. Yeah, I loved my Grandpa Paul. He took me to see a lot of my first plays and musicals with my grandma. We drove down to the Oregon Shakespeare Festival in Ashland, and they kind of asked me which plays I would want to go to, and we saw a mix of the ones that they wanted to and the ones that I did. We saw My Fair Lady was the first musical, and I probably made them see some more leftist, avant-garde stuff than they would have seen. Yeah, he also let us drive his golf cart as kids. So we would drive around with him, and it was just really fun to just sit there with him and drive a vehicle for the first time. And one time, Connor and I got a little bit of a crazy wild hair when we were probably 6 or 7. We decided to take the golf cart on a joyride ourselves, and the golf cart started sliding down the hill that it was parked on, and I didn't know how to work the emergency brake because I was a child. Somehow we must have hit the back of something and we didn't end up hurting ourselves, but I don't remember him ever yelling at us for that. Which, if he had, yeah, there's just no way. He was just a very kind man and a great grandfather, so we'll miss him.
My name is Connor. I am the middle grandchild on the Dave side. These are some pictures from a very big memory I have with my grandpa. We did 2 different fishing trips in Alaska, which is a place I know he had some connections to and really loved. We went on a charter boat the first time, and it was just a really magical trip. A lot of fish, a lot of big salmon. We saw whales breaching one day, and it's just a cherished memory, me and him, that I'll always think about whenever I'm fishing in the future. The second trip, my mom's brother and her dad came with us, and that was equally nice. I think that's what that other picture is there. So, yeah, it was just some very good memories with Grandpa Paul. I'm thinking of some other more recent memories I've had with him where he came to visit last year. I have a new cat that's my kind of favorite little animal friend. And he came and met the cat and told us some of his own stories of his childhood with the cat. Some were not quite as loving. He's telling me this while my cat is in his lap and he's petting it. One story that stood out was one of their cats managed to jump into an oven while it was on without anyone's knowledge. And they heard the cat yelling in the oven about 10 minutes later and pulled it out, and hair was singed and it was smoking. And, the cat was okay. That was one of the stories where the cat made it out. So I'll always think of that with him too. He always tried to connect with you in some way with his own experiences and stories, so I'll miss him a lot. Thank you.
All right, I want to say one more thing because no one mentioned it, but Chicago Rummy is another thing that we're so thankful for Grandpa for passing along. We actually played last night. I've now passed it on to my husband, and he beat us, so that's disappointing. But yeah, a lot of great memories of Grandpa, and that's absolutely one that will continue forward.
TSM?
This is Old Man by Neil Young.
You love Neil Young. Yeah.
Old man, look at my life. I'm a lot like you were. Old man, look at my life. I'm a lot like you were. Old man, look at my life. 24, there's so much more. Live alone in a paradise that makes you think of two. Love lost, such a cost. Give me things that won't get lost, like a coin that won't get tossed, rolling home with you. Old man, take a look at my life. I'm a lot like you. I need someone to love me the whole day through. I wanna look in my eyes and you can tell that's true. Lullabies, look in your eyes. Run around in the same old town. Doesn't mean that much to me, to mean that much to you. Love lost, such a cost. Give me things that won't get lost, like a coin that won't get tossed, rolling home to you. Old man, take a look at my life. I'm a lot like you. I need someone to hold me the whole day through. I wanna look in my eyes and you can tell that's true. Old man, look at my life. I'm a lot like you were. Old man, look at my life. I'm a lot like you were.
So we're going to open it up. A few other folks would like to say a few words. I know Allison and Cindy. Sorry to make you follow Chloe there.
Chloe, I grew up with that song, and that was absolutely outstanding. Even better than the way you sang it. My name is Allison Kelly, and I have the privilege of serving as the president of the Rotary Club of Salem this year. I am so honored to be here with all of you. We are sorry for your loss. Leona, what a family. What a family. What a dynamic. All of you, David, Michael, all of the grandkids, the sisters, having raised 4 daughters. He is right here. He lives on in each of you. And he always will. Thank you for sharing him with us. He was a member of our club for 39 years. If you aren't familiar with Rotary, 1.2 members worldwide, a force amazing good. And Paul exemplified everything that was beautiful about Rotary. I didn't know him well, but I think I do now. With a name like Kelly, there's a little DNA, I think, that's in common here. I'm not sure I ever saw him without a warm, bright, kind, mischievous smile on his face. He had a twinkle. There was energy in what he did in greeting Rotarians as we joined every week for lunch. He knew their names, he knew something about their lives. He volunteered and never sought the limelight. Never sought attention for himself, but he lives on in all of you. So thank you for sharing him with us. He was a very special man, part of our club. I would like to read something that a past president wrote about him. Let me just pull it up real quickly. This was written about Paul in 2016 by the current president at the time. If I were to highlight someone this week, my Rotary hero would be Paul Farrell. Every week, in a quiet, humble, but very persistent manner, Paul makes sure that everyone in the club gets counted as present. Not only does he know everyone's name, but jokingly, he has your number. When you pass Paul in the doorway on Wednesday, you are always greeted with a smile, a feeling that you are welcome and important to the club, and surprisingly, he knows something about you, your week's activities, and your hopes for the future. That was your dad. That was Paul. Thank you for sharing him with us. We have a lot of Rotarians here and 8 past presidents. If you would just wave real quickly so that we can see the force that you are. Thank you for sharing with us today.
Hey there. My name's Cindy Condon, and I've been asked to speak to you today about his time with Pacific Pride. But before I do that, for those of you that don't know, Paul traveled a lot in his job with Pacific Pride, and certainly Texaco. And I'm not sure he missed a Rotary meeting. He would go be in Ohio and find the local Rotary chapter and make sure he attended that meeting. He was a committed, loyal Rotarian for sure. So just wanted to make sure I mentioned that with you in the room. So Paul had a pretty full and successful career prior to his arrival in Salem. You've heard about some of that today. As Bruce Douglas would proudly say, I tricked Paul and Leona to leave Texaco and come to work with us. I wasn't sure what we'd have him do, but we needed him, and we certainly did. Luckily, Leona approved of the change and was a full partner in the adventure. When he came to the Truex companies, he worked on the retail side of the business. But in due time, he came over to the Pacific Pride side of the business, which was my side of the business. Pacific Pride was the shiny new company in the family. To make it work, our fellow petroleum distributors needed to come along for the ride on a whole new concept in commercial fueling. Paul was the perfect person for the job. He knew the people, the industry, believed in the product, and was willing to work to accomplish the mission. He jumped at the chance to start something new, work with younger and inexperienced people with so much to learn from him. He was all in. And as many of you know, when Paul was all in on something, he did the heavy lifting and carried others with him. Paul was a great salesman. He was a salesman. He loved making a sale and hated losing one. There was no one better at genuinely relating to people than Paul, as we've heard today. He loved contact with people and loved contact, and people loved contact with him. Paul knew Pacific Pride would be good for a distributor's business if people trusted him. Trust is a needed quality of a salesperson, and Paul was deeply trusted. He worked to help them be successful. He was a mentor to many. He made our customers feel special, just like many of us in this room felt when Paul drew us into his sphere. I would marvel at Paul's ability to recall people's names, something about their family or business detail, what school they attended, the mascot of the school, and often the win-loss record of the sport in season. And he relished it in talking to a duck when the Huskies won. He just would not let that rest. He could do that because he actually listened to people to learn what they valued and how Pacific Pride might fit their business. He seldom, if ever, talked about himself. That wasn't part of his shtick. On a more personal note, Paul and I worked closely together for almost 25 years. He was a business colleague and a great friend. Paul was 20 years older than me in an industry which didn't welcome women, especially young women with open arms. Well, and some did have very open arms. Paul welcomed people who came ready to do the job. He respected people, regardless of who you were. He respected those people like him who worked hard to accomplish the mission. He managed and mentored salespeople, including several female sales reps, giving them support only when they needed it in a man's world not quite ready for them. Paul knew that although men often had the top job, there was often a wife working right beside him, and the offices were filled with women who made the businesses hum. He knew the value of women in business. Although Paul was conservative, so very conservative. I was pleased to hear some progressive, some leftist kind of stuff. And he relished the challenges every day. He embraced change in the business he knew so well and relished the changes every day. Like all good teachers, he taught his lessons by example. It was a pleasure to learn from him. He served his family, his country, his employers, and his communities. He worked to live. Somebody in reading this, as for an editor, asked me if I made a mistake and meant to write, he lived to work. And it was intentional. He worked to live. What he did outside of work was remarkable. He was thankful for the opportunities he had, and he felt a great need to serve fully and give back to those less fortunate. He'll be missed and remembered for who he was and how he lived. Those Pacific Pride signs one sees across the country are good reminders of Paul. He really knew the people behind them and likely made the sale. So, thank you.
My name is Stephanie. I'm Dave's partner, and so I was lucky enough to call Paul my father-in-law for the last 30 years. A lot has been said, and I'm going to echo a lot of that, but I'll try to make it brief. But I do have to add one more thing to Paul's long list of attributes. I'm sure many of you know that Paul had an insatiable appetite for reading. He read multiple papers every day, but he was particularly fond of quoting the Wall Street Journal. At our house, he had to settle for the New York Times, which he didn't like as much, and even that he read top to bottom. He wasn't pigeonholed into a particular genre. He read spy novels and fiction, nonfiction, Oprah's book club, anything was fair game. And he often swapped recommendations with our oldest daughter, Hannah, his granddaughter, who was 25. They read many of the same books. And for me, as someone who reads at the level of a third grader, the speed of a third grader, I was always amazed and frankly envious that he could just plow through books with superhuman speed. And we reflected back, as we reflected back over the last month, over his graciousness and his thoughtfulness and what a kind person he was. I'm starting to understand that Paul's gift and love for reading wasn't just a hobby. Reading was his way of connecting with the world around him. He read with genuine curiosity an interest, and an open heart. In short, he read books like he read people. My most treasured experience of this with Paul was when Dave and I were going through a rough patch in our relationship. And Paul was a man who I viewed as pretty much perfect. I thought he might have the typical inclination to take sides or judge for what we were going through. And the first thing that Paul did when he saw me in person was give me a hug. He said that with a large family, he had been in many situations where they needed to offer support. Life isn't perfect, and that's when you need each other the most. He offered only love and kindness, judgment-free, and I was blown away by his emotional intelligence. From that point, it really elevated our relationship, and I viewed him differently too. He had read, absorbed, and understood our situation just like a book. So, in honor of Paul, we should all try to read more, both the written word, but more importantly, the people around us. Rest in peace, Paul. You'll be missed. Thank you.
So if there's anybody else that wants to come up, feel free to come up if you'd like. Yes. And then while we're waiting, Dave White. We have food if you haven't had any afterwards, and an open bar. And folks include, I'm going to read a poem, but we want to open this up if anybody else wants to speak.
I have the honor of commanding a civil affairs brigade in Portland, Oregon. We had 805 troops stationed on the west part of the United States, 5 battalions. So Paul was an integral part of that unit. When I was commanding, we were part of the Special Operations Command. If you've ever heard of that, that's made up of the Navy SEALs, the Air Force Commandos, the Marines, and also the Army group. And so Paul had to stay in shape. And we had tests every year. Paul was an integral part of the unit. It's not normal to become a colonel in the Army. There's a lieutenant colonel and a full colonel. And it was an honor when Paul retired to request that he could get the Legion of Merit, which is one of the highest rewards ever presented to a reservist. So thanks for the family support, Leona. We love you for all the kind support you gave. Those 80 missions that we averaged per year was throughout a peaceful world and sometimes not so peaceful areas. So thank you.
I'm Rick Coppo, and I work at Marion Food Share and Meals on Wheels. And I want to make sure everyone knows another legacy that is going to last. Allison, I really appreciated when you mentioned the family and the kids, and you know, you are the legacy of Paul exists because of your memory. But I want to make sure you actually know another legacy that's going to exist in Salem. Paul was a board member of Meals on Wheels, and he was a long-term board member and volunteer driver. And about almost 10 years ago, the organization Meals on Wheels was kind of collapsing. And Paul, as a board member, had some really humble insight. You know, he said, Meals on Wheels is super important. And he came to Marion Polk Food Share and said, will you guys consider running this? And I gotta tell you, it is incredibly humble for a board of directors of an organization to go to another nonprofit and say, could you take over? And I really appreciated that humbleness to say, Meals on Wheels is a great mission. We just need some backroom support. And so we did. Marion Polk Food Share was able to take that over. And lots of times when you see something like that, the existing board members or existing volunteers just say, thank God, and they leave. And Paul stayed. I mean, Paul stayed as a Meals on Wheels volunteer. And almost to the last time I saw him, you know, he'd ask me, how's it going? You know, And I think he thought he was like thankful that we came in. And I think he has that wrong, because I am incredibly thankful that he and that board at the time, but he was really the board leader of that movement, of that thought, said, we're gonna make sure seniors in our community are fed. And we don't need our name attached to our board or whatever. And so his legacy is, today, right now, probably about 850 seniors are receiving a meal in part because of this. Thank you.
My cousin Bill. Never at a loss for words.
Yeah, I feel rather blessed. I have 7 uncles, and two of my uncles, 2 of my favorite uncles are Uncle Paul and my Uncle Bill, sitting right over there, and I have some of the best memories. And 2 little anecdotes I remember of Uncle Paul is I was, I think, 8 years old, and I got my first paper route, delivering the Tacoma News Tribune back in the quarters behind Madigan Hospital where we were living. And I didn't have a bicycle. A fair amount of ground to cover. And Uncle Paul went out and pulled out his cherished childhood bike that I'm sure his sisters would probably recognize. It was a big old black heavy bike, but I rode that on my paper route until I got my own. I saved up enough money to buy my own bike. But I'll always remember that generosity. It was everywhere, as you said. And then the other story I remember about Uncle Paul was when we first went to Kauai, when you guys first started dating, and again, his thirst for knowledge. He wanted to learn the Hawaiian alphabet and how to pronounce all the road signs as you go around the island of Kauai. And they asked him, okay, Paul, what's that one? He just kind of sounded out, Waimea. That's great. Kaloa. And he was really, really getting into this, and they kind of went by the cane field, and they said, okay, Paul, what's that one? And he says, Pipeline. That's pretty amazing, except it's pipeline, Paul. I'm
not sure the last one was that. Thanks for a good job. So, unless there's anybody else who wants to come up, you know, Dad was 97% Irish. He had his DNA tested, and I know he'd been to Ireland a couple times. We were fortunate to travel as a family in 2017 and spent 2 weeks traveling through there. We went to the ancestral home of the Farrells in County Longford, and we had a great discussion with the originator of the Farrell family, and I remember sitting in a pub, and Dave and I had the chance to sit down with my dad and spend like a good hour just talking to him about his life. And I remember sitting in this pub in Galway thinking, this is something we'll never capture again. But we knew Ireland was important to him, and going through his effects, we found a poem that he'd written, an Irish poem, in his own handwriting in his briefcase. And we thought it would be nice to conclude today by just reading that poem. So, do you have it up there, Dave?
I don't.
Oh, it's not, okay.
Got the Blarney Stone that he kissed.
Oh, okay, well, that's even better. May there always be work for your hands to do. May your purse always have a coin or two. May the sun always shine on your window pane. May a rainbow be certain to follow each rain. May the hand of a friend always be near you. May God fill your heart with gladness to cheer you. And may you be in heaven a half hour before the devil knows you're dead. So we really appreciate everybody being here. And like I say, there's food and open bar, and hopefully everybody can get a chance to socialize and maybe tell some more stories about our dad and grandpa and husband and brother. So thank you guys.